I should have left hours ago. That's the thought that cuts through the silence as I sit hunched over my laptop in the corner of the university library, surrounded by towers of textbooks and empty coffee cups that have gone cold. The fluorescent lights above me hum their mechanical lullaby, casting everything in that harsh, institutional glow that makes even familiar spaces feel alien after dark. Outside, the campus has surrendered to the quiet hours, when the last of the evening stragglers have stumbled back to their dorms, and the only sounds are the distant hum of vending machines and the occasional creak of an old building settling into itself. I've been coming here for months now, claiming the same corner table every night like some creature of habit I never intended to become. It started as necessity. My roommates and their endless parade of friends, video games, and conversations that somehow always managed to be both loud and meaningless. But somewhere along the way, these late nights became something else. A refuge. A place where I could exist without explanation, without the weight of expectations pressing down on my shoulders like a hand that never lifts. The thing about being 22 is that everyone assumes you know exactly what comes next. They expect you to have plans, ambitions, a clear trajectory from here to wherever successful people go. But I've spent 4 years studying literature and philosophy, filling my head with beautiful ideas and profound questions, and I still wake up most mornings feeling like I'm pretending to be someone I don't quite recognize. Tonight, staring at the same paragraph I've been trying to write for my senior thesis for the past 2 hours, I feel that familiar knot of uncertainty tightening in my chest. The library closes at midnight on weeknights, but the staff here knows me. They've stopped announcing the approaching closure over the intercom, trusting that I'll pack up my things and make my way toward the exit when the time comes. It's a small kindness, this unspoken understanding, and I've grown protective of it. There's something sacred about these final moments, when the building empties and the silence deepens, when I can finally hear my own thoughts without competing against the world. But tonight feels different. Tonight, as I glance at my phone and see that it's already 12:15, I realize I've lost track of time completely. The building has that hollow quality it takes on after hours, when the heating system shuts down and every sound seems to echo longer than it should. I close my laptop with a soft click that seems to reverberate through the empty space, and begin the familiar ritual of packing away my books, my notes, the scattered debris of another night, spent chasing thoughts that always seem to slip away just as I'm about to catch them. It's then that I notice him standing in the doorway. Victor. I know his name from the small badge pinned to his security uniform, though we've never been formally introduced. He's the night guard, the one who walks the halls after midnight with his quiet footsteps and his careful attention to details most people would never notice. I've seen him before, of course, brief encounters at the front desk when I'm checking out books, passing moments in the elevator when he's making his rounds. But I've never really looked at him, not the way I find myself looking now. He's older than me, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of presence that fills a doorway, even when he's standing perfectly still. His uniform fits him well, crisp and clean despite the late hour, and there's something in the way he carries himself that suggests a man who takes his responsibilities seriously. His hair is dark, cut short and neat, and his eyes, when they meet mine across the empty study space, are the kind of brown that seems to see more than it reveals. Building's closed, he says, and his voice is exactly what I expected. Low, measured, carrying the authority of someone who's used to being listened to without having to raise his voice. There's no irritation in his tone, no suggestion that I've inconvenienced him by staying late. It's simply a statement of fact, delivered with the same quiet certainty that seems to define everything about him. I mumble an apology as I finish stuffing my backpack, suddenly aware of how disheveled I must look after hours of hunching over my laptop. My hair is probably sticking up in places, and I can feel the wrinkles in my shirt from where I've been leaning against the chair. But when I glance up at him, there's no judgment in his expression, just a kind of patient attention that makes me feel seen in a way that's both uncomfortable and oddly reassuring. He waits as I gather the last of my things, not tapping his foot or checking his watch, just standing there with that same steady presence. When I finally shoulder my backpack and take a tentative step toward the door, He moves aside to let me pass, falling into step beside me as we make our way through the darkened corridors toward the exit. The building feels different with him beside me. The shadows seem less oppressive, the silence less complete. His footsteps match mine, a subtle rhythm that somehow makes the walk feel less solitary than it usually does. We pass the circulation desk with its darkened computers, the reference section with its towering shelves casting long shadows across the carpeted floor, the periodical room where I sometimes go to read when I need a change of scenery. It's not until we reach the stairwell that everything changes. The heavy metal door stands before us, painted that institutional green that seems designed to discourage lingering. Beyond it, I know, are 3 flights of concrete steps that lead down to the main entrance, where the security desk sits empty except for the bank of monitors that cycle through feed from cameras positioned throughout the building. It's a route I've taken hundreds of times, usually alone, my footsteps echoing against the bare walls as I make my descent into the night. But tonight, Victor stops. He pauses with his hand on the door handle, and for a moment I think he's forgotten something, or perhaps he's heard a sound that escaped my notice. But when I follow his gaze, I see him looking up at the small black camera mounted in the corner above the hallway, its red light blinking steadily in the darkness. Then he turns to me, and something in his expression shifts. It's subtle, a slight softening around the eyes, a barely perceptible change in the set of his shoulders. But in that moment, I feel the air between us change, becoming charged with something I can't quite name. "No cameras here," he says, nodding toward the stairwell beyond the door. His voice is quieter now, almost conspiratorial, as if he's sharing a secret that only we are meant to know. And then he proves it. He doesn't say anything else, doesn't explain what he means or why it matters. Instead, he steps closer, close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough that I catch the faint scent of his cologne mixed with something distinctly masculine and real. Close enough that I can see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the slight stubble along his jaw that suggests the end of a long day. My heart begins to beat faster, though I couldn't say exactly why. There's something in the way he's looking at me, something in the charged space between us that makes my skin feel suddenly alive. I should step back, should maintain the polite distance that strangers are supposed to keep. But I don't. I can't. Instead, I find myself frozen in place, caught between the desire to flee and the inexplicable pull to stay exactly where I am. The silence stretches between us, heavy with unspoken possibilities. In the distance, I can hear the building's heating system cycling on with a low mechanical hum, and somewhere far below, the sound of a door closing echoes up through the stairwell. But here, in this suspended moment, the world feels reduced to just the two of us and the space we're sharing. He doesn't touch me, doesn't say anything more. But the way he's standing, the way he's looking at me, the way the air itself seems to thicken around us, it all adds up to something that feels like an invitation I'm not sure I understand but can't bring myself to refuse. Later, when I'm lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I'll try to make sense of what happened in that hallway. I'll replay the moment over and over, searching for clues in his expression, in the tone of his voice, in the careful way he positioned himself between me and the world beyond that door. But in the moment itself, there's no room for analysis, no space for the rational part of my mind that usually keeps me safe from situations I don't fully understand. There's only the heat of his proximity, the weight of his attention, and the sudden, overwhelming awareness that something fundamental has just shifted between us. Something that can't be taken back or explained away or dismissed as a simple misunderstanding. Something that changes everything. The days that follow blur together in a haze of ordinary moments that feel anything but ordinary. I return to my routine, classes, library, late nights, hunched over textbooks, but everything carries the weight of that encounter in the hallway. The memory of Victor's proximity, the way he looked at me when he mentioned the cameras, sits like a stone in my chest, heavy and impossible to ignore. I tell myself it meant nothing, that I misread the situation, projected significance onto a moment that was probably just awkward timing and poor lighting. But even as I try to rationalize it away, I find myself paying attention to things I never noticed before. The way the security desk sits empty during evening hours. The pattern of his rounds, glimpsed through peripheral vision as I pretend to focus on my work. The sound of his footsteps in the corridor outside the study room, always measured, never hurried. My senior year was supposed to be about closure, about tying up loose ends and preparing for whatever comes after graduation. Instead, I feel more uncertain than ever. My thesis advisor keeps asking about my post-graduation plans, and I keep giving the same vague answers about want to take some time to figure things out. The truth is, I don't know what I want. I've spent 4 years studying literature and philosophy, filling my head with other people's ideas about meaning and purpose, but I still wake up most mornings feeling like I'm sleepwalking through someone else's life. The library has always been my sanctuary from that uncertainty. Here, surrounded by books and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights, I can exist in a space between questions and answers, where the weight of the future feels temporarily lifted. But now, even this refuge carries a charge I don't fully understand. Victor is different from anyone I've encountered in this academic bubble I've been living in for 4 years, where my classmates are all sharp edges and nervous energy, constantly performing their intelligence and ambition. He moves through the world with a quiet confidence that needs no validation. He's older, settled in a way that suggests he's already figured out who he is and what he's meant to do. There's something both intimidating and magnetic about that kind of certainty. I start noticing him in ways I never did before. The way he checks the front desk at exactly 9:30 each evening, making notes on a clipboard with the same careful attention he brings to everything. The way he nods to the evening librarians as they pack up their things, always polite but never overly familiar. The way his uniform never seems wrinkled, even at the end of his shift, as if he takes pride in maintaining standards that no one else would notice. Our interactions remain minimal, surface-level exchanges that reveal nothing and everything at once. When I check out books at the circulation desk, and he happens to be nearby, he'll nod in my direction. Sometimes he'll comment on the weather when we pass in the elevator, his voice carrying that same measured quality that made such an impression that first night. These conversations never last more than a few sentences, but they leave me analyzing every word, every pause, searching for hidden meaning in the most mundane exchanges. It becomes a kind of game I play with myself, timing my movements around the library to intersect with his rounds. I tell myself it's coincidence, that I'm simply maintaining my usual schedule, but the truth is more complicated. There's something about his presence that makes the space feel different, more charged with possibility. When he's nearby, even the familiar corners of the library seem to hold secrets I haven't discovered yet. He notices everything, I realize, not in an intrusive way, but with the kind of quiet attention that comes from genuinely caring about the space he's responsible for. He knows which students tend to stay late, which areas of the building are most likely to have problems, which security protocols matter, and which ones exist merely to satisfy bureaucratic requirements. It's the kind of institutional knowledge that can only come from years of patient observation. One evening, as I'm packing up my things at my usual table, I hear his voice behind me. Just wanted to let you know the building's going to be closing a few minutes early tonight. Staff meeting. His tone is professional, matter of fact, but when I turn to look at him, there's something in his expression that suggests this isn't entirely routine. I thank him for the heads up and continue gathering my books, acutely aware of his presence as he moves through the study area, checking for other stragglers. When he returns to where I'm standing, backpack finally packed and ready to leave, he doesn't immediately start walking toward the exit. Instead, he pauses as if weighing something in his mind. "You're here pretty late most nights," he observes, and it's not quite a question, but not quite a statement either. There's genuine curiosity in his voice, the kind that suggests he's actually interested in the answer. I explain about my thesis, about how the library is quieter than my apartment, about how I've always been something of a night owl. As I talk, I notice the way he listens, giving me his full attention in a way that feels rare and valuable. Most people, I've learned, are simply waiting for their turn to speak. But Victor seems genuinely interested in understanding and seeing the world through someone else's perspective. When I finish explaining, he nods slowly, as if filing away this information for future reference. Then he says something that catches me off guard. Must get lonely sometimes, all those late nights by yourself. The comment lands heavier than it should, carrying implications I'm not sure either of us is ready to acknowledge. There's something in his voice, a kind of recognition that suggests he knows something about solitude, about the weight of quiet hours spent in empty spaces. For a moment, the professional distance between us seems to thin, revealing something more human underneath. We walk toward the exit together, our footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. But tonight, instead of heading directly to the main entrance, he takes a slight detour past the stairwell where everything changed. As we approach that familiar green door, I feel my pulse quicken, remembering the charged moment we shared there just days ago. He slows his pace, glancing up at the camera in the hallway with the same careful attention he showed before. Then he looks at me, and something passes between us. Not quite a smile, not quite a question, but an acknowledgement of something unspoken that continues to exist in the space between us. The moment stretches, heavy with possibility, before he finally continues toward the main exit. But as I push through the glass doors into the cool night air, I can feel the weight of his attention following me, and I know that whatever began in that stairwell is far from over. 3 weeks pass before everything changes again. 3 weeks of careful glances and measured conversations, of timing my departures to coincide with his rounds, of carrying the weight of unspoken possibility through my daily routine like a secret I can't quite bring myself to examine too closely. I've become expert at reading the subtle signs of his presence, the soft echo of his footsteps in distant corridors, the brief glimpse of his uniform reflected in darkened windows, the way the building itself seems to settle differently when he's making his rounds. Tonight feels different from the moment I settle into my usual corner table. There's an electricity in the air, a sense of anticipation that I can't attribute to anything specific but can't ignore either. The library empties earlier than usual, a Wednesday night in mid-October when most students are either cramming for midterms or recovering from them. By 11:30, I'm alone with my books and the familiar hum of fluorescent lights, but instead of feeling isolated, I feel poised on the edge of something significant. When Victor appears in the doorway at 15 minutes past midnight, I'm not surprised. I've been waiting for him, though I couldn't have articulated exactly what I was waiting for. He doesn't announce that the building is closed, doesn't go through the usual professional routine. Instead, he simply stands there, watching me with an expression I can't quite read. Time to go, he says finally, but his voice carries a different quality tonight. Softer, more personal, as if we've moved beyond the formal boundaries of student and security guard into something more complex and undefined. I close my laptop and begin the familiar ritual of packing my things. But tonight my movements feel deliberate, almost ceremonial. Each book I place in my backpack, each pen I cap and tuck away, carries the weight of decision. Not a conscious choice, but the kind of inevitable momentum that builds when two people circle around an unspoken truth for long enough. He waits in the doorway as I gather my belongings, and when I finally shoulder my backpack and move toward him, he falls in a step beside me with practiced ease. But tonight, instead of heading directly toward the main exit, he takes the longer route through the building, past the reference section with its towering shelves, through the periodical room where moonlight streams through tall windows, down corridors I rarely traverse during my regular visits. We walk in silence, but it's not the comfortable quiet of our previous encounters. Tonight, the silence feels charged, heavy with anticipation and the weight of things neither of us has said. Our footsteps echo against the polished floors, creating a rhythm that seems to synchronize without conscious effort. When we finally reach the stairwell, Victor stops abruptly. His hand rests on the door handle, but he doesn't push it open. Instead, he turns to face me, and in the dim light of the hallway, his expression is more serious than I've ever seen it. You ever get tired of being watched all the time? He asks, and his voice is so quiet I have to lean closer to hear him properly. The question catches me off guard, not because it's unexpected, but because it cuts so directly to something I've been feeling but couldn't name. The constant surveillance of campus life, the security cameras in every hallway, the way privacy has become something that exists only in theory. But more than that, the feeling of being observed, evaluated, measured against expectations I never agreed to meet. I laugh, but it comes out softer than intended, almost breathless. I don't know how to answer, because the truth is complicated and revealing in ways I'm not sure I'm ready for. Yes, I want to say, yes, I'm tired of feeling like I'm always performing, always being watched, always having to be someone other than whoever I actually am. Before I can formulate a response, Victor steps closer. Not dramatically, not with the kind of obvious intention that would allow me to prepare myself, but with the quiet certainty that has come to define everything about him. Close enough that I can see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from his body through the space between us. His hand moves, just slightly, and his fingers brush against my wrist. Not accidentally, not incidentally, but with deliberate gentleness that makes my pulse jump beneath his touch. The contact lasts only seconds, but it feels like a conversation we've been having for weeks without words. The question was never about cameras, I realize. It was about this moment, about the space we've been circling around since that first night when he told me there were no cameras in the stairwell. It was about permission, about acknowledgement, about the careful dance we've been performing around something neither of us has been willing to name. His touch against my wrist feels like an invitation written in a language I'm only beginning to understand. Not pushy, not demanding, but unmistakably clear in its intent. A question posed through contact, through proximity, through the way he's looking at me, as if he's seeing something in my face that even I don't fully recognize. I should pull away, should maintain the boundaries that separate students from staff, younger from older, the known from the dangerous unknown. But I don't. Instead, I find myself leaning into the space between us, drawn by something stronger than caution or common sense. The hallway around us fades into irrelevance. The building, the campus, the life I've been living for 4 years. All of it recedes until there's nothing but this moment, this connection, this invitation hanging in the air between us like a bridge I could choose to cross or leave untraversed. When Victor's fingers tighten almost imperceptibly against my wrist, I understand that we've moved beyond hypothetical territory. This isn't about curiosity anymore, or about the kind of idle speculation that fills empty moments. This is about choice, about stepping into something real and immediate and potentially transformative. The invitation is clear now, unmistakable in its quiet intensity. And as I meet his gaze, feeling my heart race beneath the gentle pressure of his touch, I realize that I'm already reaching for the answer that will change everything between us. The stairwell door waits behind him, promising privacy, promising a space where the rules that govern the rest of our interactions cease to apply, where cameras don't reach and consequences feel distant and abstract. All I have to do is say yes. The yes comes without words. It lives in the way I don't step back when Victor's fingers tighten against my wrist, in the way I meet his gaze instead of looking away, in the small nod that feels like signing my name to something I don't fully understand but can't bring myself to refuse. He opens the stairwell door, and I follow him into the concrete cavern beyond, where the fluorescent lights cast everything in stark relief and our footsteps echo against bare walls. That first night, we barely speak. He positions himself on the landing between floors, leaning against the painted cinder block wall, and I find myself standing closer than strangers should, close enough to feel the heat of his body in the cool air of the stairwell. When he reaches out to touch my shoulder, his movements are careful, deliberate, giving me every opportunity to pull away. But I don't. Instead, I lean into his touch, discovering that desire can be this quiet, this unspoken, and still shake the ground beneath your feet. We don't kiss that night. We don't cross any lines that can't be uncrossed. But when his thumb traces along my collarbone through the thin fabric of my shirt, when I let my hand rest against his chest and feel his heart beating beneath my palm, something fundamental shifts between us. The careful distance we've maintained dissolves, replaced by an understanding that changes the entire landscape of our interaction. From that night forward, the stairwell becomes our secret geography. Not every evening, but often enough that I begin to time my departures around the possibility of these encounters. Sometimes Victor finds reasons to extend his rounds, checking doors that don't need checking, investigating sounds that exist only in the careful choreography of our mutual desire. Other times, I linger intentionally in the library, pretending to work while actually listening for the familiar rhythm of his footsteps in the corridor beyond. The meetings follow no predictable pattern. Sometimes we talk in whispers, sharing fragments of ourselves in the space between floors. He tells me about his previous job at a downtown office building, about the way late-night security work suits his temperament, about the satisfaction he finds in maintaining order in spaces that most people take for granted. I tell him about my thesis, about the uncertainty that follows me like a shadow, about the way this library has become more home to me than any actual home I've ever known. But mostly, we exist in silence that has learned to carry weight. He'll position himself against the concrete wall, and I'll find myself drawn into the circle of his presence, close enough that the space between us becomes charged with possibility. His hand might find my wrist again, or trace along the line of my jaw with a gentleness that makes me forget how to breathe properly. Sometimes I let my fingers explore the texture of his uniform shirt, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath the fabric. These encounters exist outside of time, suspended in a place where the rules of the outside world seem temporarily irrelevant. In the stairwell, Victor isn't the security guard and I'm not the student. We're simply two people discovering the intricate choreography of attraction, learning how much can be communicated through touch that never quite crosses into territory that would force us to name what we're doing. I begin to understand that desire doesn't always announce itself with drama or urgency. Sometimes it builds slowly, accumulating in small moments until it becomes impossible to ignore. The way Victor's eyes find mine across the empty library before closing time. The careful way he positions himself when we're alone in the elevator, close enough that I can catch the scent of his cologne mixed with something distinctly his own. The way my pulse quickens when I hear his voice in the corridor, even when he's speaking to someone else entirely. The secrecy becomes part of the appeal. During daylight hours, we maintain our careful professional distance, acknowledging each other with the same polite nods we've always exchanged. But beneath the surface, I carry the memory of his touch against my skin, the weight of his attention when we're alone in that concrete sanctuary where cameras can't reach and the outside world feels safely distant. My friends begin to notice changes in my behavior, though they can't identify the source. I'm more distracted during conversations, more likely to check my phone for the time as evening approaches. When they suggest group study sessions or late-night hangouts, I find excuses that sound reasonable but feel hollow. How can I explain that I've discovered something in those after-midnight encounters that makes everything else feel pale and insubstantial? The transformation isn't just about Victor, though his presence catalyzes something that was already shifting inside me. For months, I felt like I was sleepwalking through my final year, going through motions that belonged to someone else's life. But in the stairwell, surrounded by concrete and shadow and the quiet intensity of his attention, I feel more awake than I have in years. One night, as we stand in our usual configuration on the landing between floors, Victor's hand comes to rest against the small of my back. The touch is light, almost tentative, but it sends heat radiating through my entire body. When I look up at him, his expression is serious, almost questioning, as if he's asking permission for something we haven't yet defined. I lean into his touch, letting the weight of my body answer the question his eyes are asking. His other hand comes up to cup my face, thumb tracing along my cheekbone with careful precision. We're closer now than we've ever been, close enough that I can count his eyelashes, close enough that our breathing has synchronized without conscious effort. The moment stretches between us, heavy with possibility and the weight of choices that can't be unmade. In the distance, I can hear the buildings settling around us. But here in our hidden space, the world has narrowed to just this connection, this careful exploration of boundaries that seem to shift and reshape themselves with each encounter. When Victor's thumb traces along my lower lip, barely a whisper of contact, I understand that we've reached another threshold. That the careful restraint we've maintained is about to give way to something more immediate and undeniable. Something that will change everything again. The night everything changes begins like all the others. I pack my books with deliberate slowness, hyper-aware of the approaching midnight hour and the possibility it carries. Victor appears in the doorway at 12:15, his timing so precise it feels choreographed, and we begin our familiar walk through the darkened corridors toward our sanctuary in the stairwell. But tonight, when the heavy door closes behind us, something in the air feels different, more charged, more inevitable. Victor doesn't take his usual position against the wall. Instead, he remains standing in the center of the landing, watching me with an intensity that makes my skin feel electric. For weeks, we've been dancing around the edges of something neither of us has been willing to name. We've built an entire language out of careful touches and meaningful silences, out of proximity that says everything and nothing at once. But tonight, as I meet his gaze in the harsh fluorescent light of the stairwell, I can feel the weight of unspoken words pressing against the careful boundaries we've constructed. He steps closer, close enough that I have to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. His hand comes up to rest against my cheek, thumb tracing along my jaw with the same careful precision I've come to know so well. But there's something different in his touch tonight, something more urgent beneath the familiar gentleness. "This is the only place I don't have to pretend I don't see you," he says, and his voice is so quiet I feel it more than hear it. The words crash into me with unexpected force, stripping away the careful pretense we've maintained for weeks. All this time, I thought we were both discovering something new, something unexpected that had grown out of circumstance and proximity. But Victor's words carry the weight of recognition, of something that existed long before that first night when he told me there were no cameras in the stairwell. "I've been seeing you for months," he continues, his hand still cupped against my face. "Every night you come here, every time you check out books at the front desk, every moment you think no one is paying attention. I've been watching you, and I've been pretending I wasn't." The admission hangs in the air between us, heavy with implications I'm still trying to process. This wasn't accidental, wasn't the gradual discovery I thought it was. Victor has been carrying this awareness, this attraction, through all those casual encounters, all those polite professional exchanges. While I was slowly awakening to the possibility of connection, he was already living with a weight of desire he couldn't express. "Why now?" I asked, though my voice comes out barely above a whisper. "Because I can't pretend anymore," he says simply. "Because watching you leave every night without saying what I want to say is killing me. Because this place, these few minutes after midnight, might be the only honest moments I get." His other hand finds my waist, not pulling me closer, but anchoring me in place, making it clear that this conversation is happening whether I'm ready for it or not. The careful distance we've maintained begins to collapse, not gradually, but all at once, like a dam giving way under pressure that's been building for too long. I should be frightened by his admission, by the intensity in his voice, and the way his touch has become more possessive, more certain. But instead, I feel something inside me settle into place, as if pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was solving have suddenly aligned themselves correctly. "I've been waiting for you," I realize, though I hadn't understood it until this moment. All those late nights in the library, all those carefully timed departures, all those moments when I found myself looking for his face in the corridors, it wasn't just curiosity or the gradual development of attraction. It was recognition of something that already existed, something I'd been feeling without having words for it. When Victor's thumb traces along my lower lip, the touch carries a question that's been building between us for weeks. Not whether this is real, that much is no longer in doubt, but whether we're brave enough to stop pretending it isn't happening. I lean into his touch, letting my body provide the answer my voice can't manage. His hand slides from my cheek to the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair with careful possession. When he draws me closer, close enough that I can feel his breath against my face, the space between us becomes electric with possibility. "You don't have to pretend either," he says, and the words feel like permission I didn't know I needed. When his mouth finally meets mine, it doesn't feel like a first kiss. It feels like the conclusion of a conversation we've been having for months without words, the physical manifestation of everything that's been building in the careful spaces between our other encounters. His lips are warm and surprisingly soft, moving against mine with practiced certainty that makes me forget how to think properly. The kiss deepens slowly, carefully, as if we both understand that crossing this threshold changes everything between us. His hand tightens in my hair, not roughly, but with enough pressure to make me gasp against his mouth. When I respond by pressing closer, by letting my hands find purchase against his chest, I feel him smile against my lips. When we finally break apart, both breathing harder than we were moments before, Victor rests his forehead against mine. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting harsh shadows against the concrete walls. But in this moment, our hidden sanctuary feels like the most beautiful place in the world. "This is what I've been waiting for," he says, his voice rough with emotion I've never heard from him before. "This is what all those careful conversations and professional distances were hiding." As I stand in the circle of his arms, heart racing and lips still tingling from his kiss, I understand that we've moved beyond the realm of possibility into something immediate and undeniable. Something that exists in the space between secrecy and revelation, between the careful boundaries of our daylight interactions and the raw honesty of these after-midnight encounters. Something that has finally claimed its name, and in doing so, has changed everything we thought we knew about who we are and what we're willing to risk for the chance to be real with each other. The aftermath of the kiss exists in a suspended moment where time seems to have stopped entirely. We stand pressed together in the harsh light of the stairwell, breathing hard, the taste of something irreversible lingering between us. Victor's hands still frame my face, his thumbs tracing gentle circles along my cheekbones, as if he's memorizing the texture of my skin. I can feel my heart hammering against my ribs, so loud I'm certain he must hear it too. But slowly, inevitably, reality begins to seep back into our hidden sanctuary. The fluorescent lights continue their mechanical hum. The building settles around us with familiar creaks and sighs, and somewhere in the distance, a door closes with echoing finality. The spell that held us suspended in possibility begins to crack, letting in the weight of everything we haven't considered, everything we've been too caught up in the moment to acknowledge. Victor's expression shifts first. I watch as the certainty that carried him through his confession and that devastating kiss begins to waver, replaced by something more complex and troubled. His hands slide from my face to my shoulders, creating a small but significant distance between us that feels like the first cold breath of morning after a perfect dream. "What happens now?" I hear myself ask, though my voice sounds strange to my own ears, rougher than usual and tinged with something that might be desperation. The question hangs in the air between us, heavy with implications neither of us is prepared to navigate. Because now that we've crossed this line, now that we've given name and form to what's been building between us for weeks, we have to confront the reality of what it means. The 15-year age gap that seemed insignificant in the charged privacy of our after-midnight encounters suddenly feels vast and complicated. The fact that he's staff and I'm a student, that our lives exist in entirely different orbits, that what we've just shared could have consequences neither of us has fully considered. Victor runs a hand through his hair, a gesture I've never seen from him before, and I realize this is the first time I've seen him look uncertain. The quiet confidence that has defined every interaction we've had seems to have deserted him, leaving behind someone who looks as confused and overwhelmed as I feel. "Nothing changes," he says finally, but his voice lacks the conviction that usually characterizes everything he says. "Outside these stairs, it never happened." The words hit me like cold water, shocking in their stark practicality. I understand the logic behind them, the professional boundaries that exist for good reason, the complications that would arise if our connection became public knowledge, the way secrets sometimes need to remain secrets to survive. But understanding doesn't make the words hurt any less. I want to argue, to demand something more substantial than stolen moments in hidden spaces. But when I look at his face, I see the weight he's carrying, the careful calculations happening behind his eyes. This isn't just about protecting himself or his job. It's about protecting me too, about recognizing that the world beyond this stairwell wouldn't understand what we've found here, wouldn't see the careful tenderness and genuine connection that has grown between us. But even as he speaks the words that should create distance between us, his body betrays him. His hands remain on my shoulders, his touch gentle but unmistakably possessive. When I take a half step closer, he doesn't pull away. Instead, he draws me back into the circle of his arms, as if he can't quite bring himself to practice the separation he's just prescribed. So we'll pretend, I say, and it's not really a question because I can already feel myself agreeing to terms I don't fully understand. We'll act like nothing happened. His laugh is quiet and bitter. I don't know if I can do that, he admits. I don't know if I can go back to pretending I don't think about you. Don't notice every time you walk into a room. Don't count the hours until midnight hoping you'll still be here. The honesty in his voice breaks something open inside me. This isn't just about desire or attraction anymore. It's about the way genuine connection has taken root between us, growing in the shadows and silence until it's become something neither of us knows how to live without. When he cups my jaw in his hands again, his touch carries the weight of everything we're agreeing to sacrifice. Outside these walls, we'll be strangers again. Polite nods in the corridor, professional distances, careful avoidance of any behavior that might hint at what exists between us in these stolen moments. But here, in this space where cameras can't reach and the rules of the outside world seem temporarily suspended, we can be honest about what we've found. Here, we can acknowledge that what started as attraction has deepened into something more complex and meaningful. Here, we can admit that we're both willing to carry this secret, to protect it even if it means carrying it alone. When Victor kisses me again, it tastes like goodbye and promise in equal measure. Like the sealing of a pact neither of us fully understands, but both of us feels compelled to honor. His mouth moves against mine with careful intensity, as if he's trying to memorize the shape and taste of this moment before we have to return to the world that demands we pretend it never happened. When we finally break apart, both breathing hard, he rests his forehead against mine one last time. Then he steps back, creating the distance that will define our public interactions, rebuilding the walls that must exist everywhere except here. The choice is raw and heavy, suspended in the space between us like a weight we'll both have to carry. Secrecy or nothing at all. The careful protection of something precious or the loss of it entirely. As I look into his eyes, seeing my own conflict reflected there, I understand that we've already made our decision. We'll risk it. We'll carry this secret between us, meeting in shadows and stolen moments, protecting what we've found, even if it means living with the constant ache of having to pretend it doesn't exist. As Victor reaches for the door handle, preparing to escort me back into the world where we're strangers again, his hand finds mine one last time. The touch lasts only seconds, but it feels like a promise written in a language only we understand. A promise that some things are worth the risk of carrying them in secret. The walk home that night is unlike any I've taken before. My feet follow the familiar route across campus and through the quiet residential streets that lead to my apartment, but everything feels transformed, as if I'm seeing this world through different eyes. The streetlights cast longer shadows, the November air carries a sharper bite, and even the sound of my own footsteps seems amplified in the late-night silence. I carry the memory of Victor's touch like a physical presence. The place where his hands cupped my face still tingles with phantom sensation, and I can taste the echo of his kiss on my lips. But more than the physical memory, I carry the weight of what we've agreed to, this careful balance between connection and concealment, between the truth of what exists between us and the lie we'll perform for the rest of the world. The city around me feels different too, charged with new possibility and new danger. Every security camera mounted on buildings and streetlights seems to watch me with knowing eyes. Every window that might hold an observer makes me conscious of the secret I'm now carrying. I understand for the first time what it means to live with something that can't be shared, can't be celebrated, can't be acknowledged in the light of day. When I finally reach my apartment building, I pause on the front steps, reluctant to end this liminal space between what happened in the stairwell and what will begin tomorrow when I have to pretend it never occurred. My roommates are probably asleep, the apartment dark and quiet, offering no audience for the transformation I feel happening inside me. But I'm not ready to face the ordinary world yet, not ready to return to the version of myself that existed before Victor's hands framed my face and changed everything. I think about him, alone in the building we just left, continuing his rounds through corridors that now carry the echo of our confession. Does he feel this same sense of displacement, this strange combination of elation and loss? Is he replaying the moment when everything shifted between us? Or is he already practicing the professional distance we'll need to maintain when the sun rises? The next morning arrives with brutal normalcy. My alarm sounds at 7:30, just as it has every day for months. My roommates move through their usual routines, discussing weekend plans and complaining about upcoming exams as if the fundamental architecture of reality hasn't shifted overnight. I sit at our small kitchen table, drinking coffee and pretending to review notes for my afternoon seminar, but my attention keeps drifting to the memory of Victor's voice saying my name in the darkness of the stairwell. Campus life continues around me with oblivious momentum. Students hurry between classes, professors deliver lectures on subjects that suddenly feel abstract and irrelevant, and the library maintains its usual rhythm of quiet activity. When evening approaches, and I find myself walking toward my usual study spot, my pulse quickens with anticipation and anxiety in equal measure. Victor is there when I arrive, checking something on his clipboard at the circulation desk. Our eyes meet across the room, and for a moment, the careful distance we've agreed to maintain threatens to collapse entirely. But then he gives me the same polite nod he's always given me, the same professional acknowledgement that suggests nothing has changed between us. The performance is flawless and heartbreaking. I watch him move through his evening routine with the same quiet efficiency that first caught my attention weeks ago, and I marvel at his ability to compartmentalize, to separate the man who kissed me in the stairwell from the security guard who maintains appropriate boundaries with students. But I catch the moments when his mask slips, brief instances when his gaze lingers on me a fraction too long, when his movements carry a careful awareness of my location in the room. These glimpses of the connection we're hiding become precious, secret communications that only we can read. Hours pass with excruciating slowness. I try to focus on my work, but the words on the page blur together as I count down the minutes until midnight. When other students begin packing up their belongings and heading home, I feel the familiar flutter of anticipation mixed with uncertainty. Will he come for me tonight? Have the weight of daylight and professional obligations changed his mind about what we're risking? At 12:15, he appears in the doorway. This time, there are no words about the building being closed, no pretense of routine. He simply stands there, watching me with an expression that manages to be both guarded and achingly tender. When I close my laptop and gather my things, he waits with the patience of someone who has all the time in the world. We walk through the darkened corridors in silence, but it's a different kind of quiet than we've shared before. This silence carries the weight of everything we've acknowledged and everything we've agreed to protect. When we reach the stairwell door, Victor pauses with his hand on the handle, looking at me with something that might be a question. I answer by stepping closer, close enough that he can feel the decision in my proximity. He opens the door, and we step together into our sanctuary, into the only space where we're allowed to be honest about what exists between us. In the harsh fluorescent light, Victor looks tired, as if the effort of maintaining our daytime charade has cost him something essential. But when he reaches for me, when his hands find their place against my face with the same careful reverence as the night before, the exhaustion in his expression gives way to something deeper and more sustaining. We don't speak about the choice we've made or the price we'll pay for these stolen moments. Instead, we exist in the space between heartbeats, between breaths, between the world that demands we remain strangers and the truth that makes such distance impossible. When Victor pulls me into his arms, when his mouth finds mine with renewed certainty, I understand that this is how we'll survive the weight of carrying the secret. In fragments and stolen moments, in careful glances and professional distances that barely contain what burns beneath them. As I sink into his kiss, feeling the solid warmth of his body against mine and tasting the promise of everything we're willing to risk for this connection, I know that some secrets are worth the careful tending they require. Some truths are worth living for, even when they can only exist in shadows.